Welcome to The Hidden Load, the podcast where we uncover the unseen weight carried by the educators and leaders in medicine and explore how to lighten it. I am Dr. Santina or Tina Wheat. I am a family physician, an educator, a leader, and a coach. Each week, we will dig into the challenges that often go unspoken, from burnout and boundaries to purpose and identity to figuring out sustainability, and share practical tools to help you move from chaos to calm and from burnout to balance. Because the hidden load does not have to be yours to carry alone, and in fact, shouldn't be. Let's get started. Welcome back to the hidden load. If you have been following along, you know that we spent our last episode talking all about reflection. We talked about why it's uncomfortable, why we don't like to do it, and why it's important for us to do it both for ourselves and for those who we are teaching and leading. And today we are going to move on to our next step of talking about both burnout and the hidden load, and that is talking about recovery. Now, if you hear the word recovery, then you might think of someone who is undergoing physical rehab or someone who has had surgery and needs to be laid up and has to get through that process to be well again. And that is just one medical lens in understanding recovery. Today, I want to talk about recovery in a different way. I want to talk about recovery in a broader sense as something that we all need to have in order to teach, lead, provide care, and ultimately live well. Recovery is a part of the antidote to burnout, and it's a really important part. It is what restores our energy, our creativity, and our ability to care. And unfortunately, it is something that so many of us often skip. So in this episode, we are going to talk about what recovery really means. We are also going to talk about why it is so hard to do and embrace, particularly for those of us in medicine. And we're also going to talk about some practical and realistic ways that you can begin to integrate recovery every day into your life and work. And then at the end, as always, I will give you a preview of our next episode, which is all about one of my favorite topics, purpose. So let's get started by defining recovery. So asking the question, what does it really mean when we are talking about recovery? To me, recovery is all about intentionally restoring yourself. That might be physically, emotionally, and mentally, particularly after periods of exertion. That probably brings to mind a thought about athletes. They train hard, but they also build recovery into their schedule. When you think of that heavy exertion, we're often think of someone running a marathon or playing a basketball game, or one of my favorite analogies of the dancers that are dancing all hours. All of these athletes know that without the recovery, they will break down. They will get injured. They will burn out, and their performance will suffer, and they will not be at the best of their game. In healthcare, though, we often ignore this. We pride ourselves on pushing through. We joke about how little sleep we got or how many hours we ended up working, and we normalize the idea of being exhausted. And when we do that, we are ignoring the truth that athletes know oh so very well. And that is that recovery just is not optional. It needs to be part of the process, because without it, you just cannot sustain your performance. Now, I started by saying that we need recovery after exertion. And you might be saying, is just going to work everyday exertion? And I would put forward for you that dealing with the emotional toll that caring for patients provides, or educating our learners in how to do those things, in addition to the sometimes grueling hours that some of us work either in our clinics or in the hospital or in our administrative buildings. All of those things are exertion and require recovery in order for us to move forward. Now, what do I mean by recovery? In our world, it does not have to mean just sleeping or taking that vacation, particularly when the vacation feels like just an added piece of stress because you have to come back to more work. Though I do think that time away and sleeping are extremely important. But I think we should be looking at recovery as intentionally creating rhythms and spaces that refill your energy so that you can keep going in healthy and sustainable ways. For example, that athlete who stretches at the end of their game or who takes a lighter day in between some of the hard training sessions. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. There are ways for us to build in recovery into every week. Now, I've mentioned that I think that recovery is important, but we know this, yet we don't do it. And so why is that? Well, there's definitely a few reasons involved. The first is going to be culture. In medicine, we are trained to value stamina. And I'm not going to lie, I do value stamina. I think about how I can keep going so I can show up the best for that patient who's at the end of the day as I did for that patient at the beginning of the day. We are trained to push through and we are trained to sacrifice. That is baked in our identity. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that that's all bad. However, it's bad when we feel like if you rest, that it's a weakness. If you take time for yourself, it might feel like you're not committed. And that's the part that I worry about. The second reason why we tend to not recover is guilt. When we think about taking a break, so many of us have this enormous sense of guilt that creeps up. We might feel guilty that we're letting our patients down. We might feel guilty that we're not there for our learners, or we might feel guilty that our colleagues have to pick up the slack. This also might show up as guilty that we should be doing more and we're not. The third reason why recovery is so hard is just habit. We have gotten used to running at full speed, and you had to in order to get here. We have normalized the exhaustion so much that it feels strange to take a pause. You feel like something's wrong when you have that moment to yourself. And it is such an ingrained habit that even when we do pause, we often don't know how to actually rest. And here is the problem with that. When we fail to recover, we don't just hurt ourselves. We unfortunately hurt the people around us. Because when we are depleted, we are not the best teachers. We are not the best leaders. And we are also not the best colleagues, the best parents, or the best partners. And all of us care about each of those identities. And when we keep modeling the overwork, we demonstrate for our learners that that's what they are supposed to do. Our learners see it, and they assume that that is what success is supposed to look like. And unfortunately, that means that we end up perpetuating a cycle of exhaustion. So let me share a story from my own life. There was a season in my career when I thought that I could just keep going. I could do one more lecture. I could do one more project, one more committee meeting. And honestly, part of me took pride in that. I thought that it was amazing how much I could juggle. And eventually, I hit a wall. I used to feel like I could say, oh, if I take a vacation, I'm going to get sick because my body just runs, and I'm finally going to stop and relax. and it's just going to take it over. I remember standing in front of a group of my learners, delivering a talk that I had given before, and realizing that I just sounded flat. I just wasn't connecting. And my patience was totally thin, and my creativity was gone. And at home, it wasn't any better. Every time I would come home, I was distracted, I was short tempered, and I was too exhausted to be present with my kids. And all I could say to my kids was no. I didn't know how to say yes to them anymore because I didn't feel like I had it in me. That was when it hit me. I wasn't broken. I wasn't failing, but I was depleted. And what I needed wasn't to push harder. What I needed to do was to find a way to recover. And that realization really did shift things for me. And I began to ask myself, what would it look like to actually build recovery into my everyday life, into my weekly life? And to do that instead of waiting for a crisis or an illness to force it on me. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the way we can integrate recovery. Because I know what some of you are thinking as you're listening to this is, yeah, recovery sounds great, but when am I supposed to have time for that? And I get that. I absolutely hear you, and I was you, which is why I want to give you practical strategies that don't require dropping everything, because that's not necessarily realistic. Going on a week-long retreat is not necessarily something that all of us can do financially, with our personal and professional obligations. We have to find other ways. And so I want to start by sharing the idea of a micro recovery. A micro recovery is a tiny pause that you build into your day. Maybe it's taking 3 deep breaths between patient encounters. Maybe it's standing up to stretch before your next Zoom meeting. Maybe it's stepping outside for 2 minutes to feel the sun on your face, or even the rain if you love the rain. These moments are able to reset your nervous system. And I love these and have even started to build them into my day. One thing that one of my organizations did was reset all of the meeting times so that there was always a break in between meetings. Instead of 30-minute meetings, we had 25-minute meetings. Instead of hour-long meetings, we had 50-minute meetings. Now, when someone schedules a meeting with me, there is an automatic gap that is built in my schedule at the beginning and at the end. So I have the time for those micro recoveries. The second strategy I'm going to give you is a transition ritual. How you move from one role to another absolutely matters. I know some people who have a short walk after work. I know some people who have a short walk after work before they go home. Others have a playlist that they like to listen to in the car that helps them shift gears. Sometimes for me, I would sit in my car, in my garage for a few moments before I walked in because I needed to reset before I walked in with my family. Now that I have a long drive, I'm able to have a long switch of gears as I both head to work and come home. These small rituals are able to tell your brain that it's time to put down one role and pick up another. And it makes it easier to show up as your best self. The third strategy that I want to share is boundaries around rest. This might mean protecting your weekends for some. It might mean guarding your sleep. It might mean saying no to one more evening commitment. These boundaries are the scaffolding that makes recovery possible. And if you need more help on boundaries, then I hope that you will go back and listen to episode 3 if you haven't already, so that you can have some strategies to have boundaries without guilt. The easiest way that I have done this is use my do not disturb on my phone, which sounds so silly, but it allows me to ensure that I'm not being woken up in the middle of sleep, that I'm not getting texts or phone calls at that time, and it allows people to send them without fear of waking me up. The fourth strategy that I want to give you is joyful activities. Recovery is not just about rest. It is about renewal. It is about identifying what it is that fills your cup. It might be music. It might be reading. It might be being crafty or being outside or hanging out with the people that you love. Those activities might sound like extras, but they're not. Those activities are essential. And the ones that are essential for you is up to you to decide. And the fifth strategy that I want to provide, and this one is important for us as leaders and as educators, is to model recovery. If we never take a vacation, our learners and colleagues assume that they should not either. If we respond to emails at midnight, we are teaching people that that is normal. Now, if when the time that you have to respond is at midnight, there are ways around this to still model recovery, which might be a message at the bottom that says that your working hours are different than the typical working hours. Or it might be having a delayed send so that they don't hit other people's inboxes until they're expected to be at work. And so this is not a hard and fast rule. What's important is that you're modeling the idea of having recovery. Because when we model recovery, we give others the permission to do the same. And that right there is education and leadership. Now, recovery is not about indulgence. It is about making deposits into your energy account so that when the demands come, and we know those demands are always going to come, you have something to draw from. So here's the reframe that I want to offer for you if you struggle with the idea of recovery. And that is that recovery is not selfish. It is strategic. And when you recover, you don't just feel better, you lead better and you educate better and you care better. You think more clearly, you problem solve more creatively, and you show up with better patience and more presence. And that means you can show up more as the authentic you. And now, as educators and leaders, that is always exactly what we need. We need to lead and educate in a way that is authentically us, because we are not just managing our own energy. We are shaping the culture for all of those around us. And if we model the overwork, we train others to do the same. But if we model recovery, we build a culture where sustainability is actually possible. So I want to leave you with a question. What is one way that you can practice recovery this week? It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, not a huge time off, just one small step. Maybe it's that 2-minute pause that I mentioned. Maybe it's a walk outside, or maybe it's protecting that time for sleep. Because recovery isn't a someday thing. Recovery has to be a today thing. It's the foundation that allows us to keep going in this demanding, beautiful, and challenging work of medicine and education. I hope you'll share with me how you're going to add that small moment of recovery into your daily or weekly schedule. Shoot me an email and let me know. So today, we talked all about recovery. We talked about why it's important. We talked about why it's hard in medicine. And we talked about simple ways that you can incorporate it into your everyday and weekly schedules. And if this conversation resonated with you, I hope that you will do 3 quick things for me. The first is to subscribe or follow the show. That way you will never miss an episode. The second is to leave a rating or a review if you haven't already. This will help other educators and leaders in medicine find the show, and it also helps let me know that these conversations matter. And third, share this episode with a colleague, particularly one who might need to find time to recover. Because here's the truth, recovery is not a tomorrow thing, it's a today thing. And it's an important strategy in helping us maintain our joy and fulfillment both at home and in work. And before we wrap up, I want to give you a little bit of a preview of what is coming next. In our next episode, we are going to talk about something that connects deeply with recovery and ensuring that you have the capacity to do all of the hard things that we do. And that is finding purpose. Recovery fills your tank, but purpose is what gives you that direction. It's what keeps you moving forward, even when the road gets hard. So make sure you join me for that. And until next time, remember, recovery isn't optional. It's part of the work. Thanks for listening and choosing to protect your energy by incorporating recovery into your everyday. Thanks for joining me on The Hidden Load. Tag me on Instagram at Dr. Tina Wheat or email me at santina@santinawheat.com with your takeaways and ideas. Don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, let's lighten your hidden load.